all the time you're jumping into the crowd. It doesn't matter where you are. It's very cleverly designed. You're jumping into thousands of people who are waving flags and shouting and like making all this noise. So I don't think not one of those riders, or certainly not one of those quotes or reflections that I've read, people were saying they never felt the pressure. The pressure is there. But it's how you can ride inside of that pressure, essentially, how you manage to connect to yourself still, your horse, your process, whatever that looks like.
Happy Monday and super welcome to the podcast. Today, we're going to talk about lots of different observations that we made when we were over in Aachen last week, me and Lorna. We had a bit of a field trip going over and watching the eventing, and we've also followed parts of the show jumping this week via live streams and etc. And all over Instagram, you hear all those cool interviews, quotes, different things that different people had said, riders been over there. And one thing that we wanted to really hone in on today are things that challenges that pop up when you represent a team, when you are not only there for yourself, but actually you represent so much more than just yourself, your country, your team. Because there were a lot of riders actually at the time of the Aachen when we were there, but also in interviews and quotes afterwards, you've really noticed that this plays a massive role. So we're gonna zoom in on that. We're gonna talk about the different things that different riders have said, and just talk around those challenges as us from mental coaches, like what we have to say around those situations, let's say. So super excited to dive into that. But as always, if this is the first episode that you're listening to, then make sure you hit the follow button so you don't miss out on any of our future episodes. And if you think this thing around mental is something where you can actually improve in your own riding, also know that apart from this podcast, you can actually work one-on-one or in group together with myself and Lorna. And if you're interested in finding out more about that, make sure you go to mindic.eu/coaching, take in your details, and we can have a little chat to see how we can support you in your riding. Right, Lorna, that out of the way. Let's dive in. What is the first thing? What is the thing that you have seen or that you have heard that is the one that really sticks with you, that really hit home with you, let's say?
I'm going to start just a little bit before that. And that's the first time I've been to Aachen. It's the first time you've been. And the one thing that stands out for me there is the atmosphere. Huh? We've done the badmintons, the Burleys, the Poes, all those big tracks. And yes, there's atmosphere there. But from the moment we walked in there, there was what we call real dressage happening as well at the same time. And the amount of people and that atmosphere and, that real championship where people are there supporting their team, not just their own team, but all the other teams as well. And the noise and the atmosphere is absolutely electric. And I think there's this thing around it where we think that, those top guys, the Michael Youngs, the Ross Cantors, Laura Collettes, all those kind of really cool people, that they don't feel that atmosphere, they don't feel that pressure. But I think from sitting in that stand from dressage to show jumping and being on that cross-country track, that's an illusion that those guys don't feel that pressure. And I think there's so many cool quotes that's exactly what you were talking about, have come out since, before it and after it, because it is an electric atmosphere.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is, like you say, the one thing that basically everyone mentions. It's Aachen. It's the atmosphere in Aachen. It's the noise. It is the support. I mean, both in positive and more stressful sense, let's say. I say they have an enormous, I think especially the German riders, but also the Belgians. There's so many Belgian people coming over to watch, and they mentioned how people are supporting along the track, standing there waving flags and stuff. And that indeed is something that you don't really, even if a lot of those riders have ridden at a lot of 5 stars, different events, but that is intense. And I still remember, as if this was yesterday, when Michael Young came in last to ride in the show jumping arena, and I swear to God, you could have heard a needle drop. It was. No one's phone could have gone off, you would have been screwed, right? It was dead silence. He jumps his entire round, and then he crosses the finish. Obviously everyone knew that he had won, and the whole stadium just explodes.
Yeah.
Like that is something that it exists everywhere, but I think that the magnitude in which you have that in Aachen is just incredible.
Yeah. And I think in front of us, when we were watching the show jumping, there was some French guys, wasn't there, sat down below us, and they had their flag, and they were obviously super excited that the French riders had came in, and like they're waving their flag and they're shouting. But the French rider came in, I can't remember who it was, but like he was actually like, whoa, like stop. I get that you're here to support me, and I really appreciate your support. Quit the energy. And that just shows you how like those guys are focused on their process, but they are feeling that pressure, they're feeling that noise. The horses are feeling that. And I think that's what's different. It's not that, you go to the Badmintons and Burleys and all those other big 5-stars, like, yes, the atmosphere is there, but I don't think I've ever experienced exactly what you say. You could literally, I think you said a needle drop, but I would say a pin drop. Literally, you could, if somebody coughed, it would have made you jump, because it was such a silent atmosphere. It's so cool.
Mm. Yeah. But so to dive into that, like what that does with the rider and how, the top riders, because here's the thing. Yeah, you can see that even some of the absolute top riders who's done several championships, Olympic games, like it gets to them, or it gets to their horses. Like if you saw, for example, Laura Collett, incredible rider, so experienced, so many huge events with this particular horse. And even this horse comes in and he takes a spook at the water jump. Like beautiful job by Laura Collett. She just managed to get through it. But then you see, like, even there, it is something extra that you. Yeah.
And I think actually that's something to pick up on, was that I'm sure lots of you have watched it on TV, but that show jumping track was quite special. It has the proper dressage arena in the middle of it, and all these fences are around the outside of it, and it's spread out. So it's encouraging you the whole time, to gallop at fences, but for your horse to stay careful at the same time. And, all the time you're jumping into the crowd. It doesn't matter where you are. It's very cleverly designed. You're jumping into thousands of people who are waving flags and shouting and like making all this noise. So I don't think not one of those riders, or certainly not one of those quotes or reflections that I've read, people were saying they never felt the pressure. The pressure is there, but it's how you can ride inside of that pressure, essentially. How you manage to connect to yourself still, your horse, your process, whatever that looks like. And that's pretty cool, because I think a lot of people have this idea that if you ride all these championships and 5-stars, that suddenly you don't feel pressure anymore. But I'd be very surprised if anyone could rock up in that atmosphere and not feel the pressure around it. And also, as you started this, it's not just for yourself. It is part of a team. Yes, you can say you're riding for yourself, but at the end of the day, you are, most of, or a lot of those teams are trying to get Olympic qualification. So it matters. Like it does matter.
Yeah, it matters for your team and everyone in the team, like team members, everyone is part of that team that has put in immense efforts for many, many years, but also ultimately your country, right?
Yeah.
Your country. There's so many people who are, supporting, of course, but that are book tickets, they're there, they're showing up, and they just want indeed the country to get that Olympic qualifier, and it's been investments made into, like, there is just immense amount of people that are, I think, counting on you to do a good job, basically. Yeah. And that is something that you can then also see, like, and also in media, like, even if there's a lot of people who are supporting, I think most people are supporting, but also you can also see in the media when it doesn't go well, there's always those freaking journalists, like, that are so quick to start to slaughter people and say this wasn't great, or she didn't do this, or he didn't do that. Like, for example, I saw, like, after the Dutch team, they were so, like, being purely shitty about that their show jumping hadn't been good enough and yada yada yada. After, like, a couple of incredible cross country rounds, they just, like, pick out that one thing where there's improvements and it's, and being really, really shitty about it, in my opinion. And to then also that's what I mean, like the pressure coming from your country and expectations and people expecting you to do a good job because you've been put in that situation or investments that's been made. I think that, okay, even if it's afterwards, but you have pressure at the time, but then you also have the aftermath of things, like how it went and what people will say afterwards.
Yeah. And I think that's true. If you, obviously there's always a scratch score, isn't there? But they're always, and I thought about that with Gemma, actually. She potentially was always going to be the scratch score. But even still that, I looked at that and imagine, how she feels when you're part of that team, and she talks about it on her own Instagram that she's so grateful for the team and, pulling her back up and being in that atmosphere, and you are part of that team. But even your own emotions throughout that, when you've not got around that cross country and the rest of your teammates have, and you've won the medal and all that kind of stuff, like, I think it's the same thing. Like, how do you feel about that? Because we know that the media, it loves a story, how it loves to go in there, it loves to pull a bit of drama out of it. And yeah, it's not just before it, is it? It's before it, it's during it, it's after it, I think it's the whole thing, whether it's just being part of a team or a championship or whatever that talks about, whatever that looks like. And also you talked about when we were there, Team GB are known for pulling out these low dressage scores all day long. And you said that, God, like, what a pressure even to keep consistently turning up when that comes the expectation that, you're going to pull a low 20 score, out of the bag. And if you look at Roz, and I actually pulled out one of her quotes, and she said that every time she rides that horse, the pressure builds, like it builds, because they don't make mistakes. Obviously, she's unbelievably epic, but so far, like, they have not made mistakes. And, but she's feeling the pressure. And that is a rider, who's European gold medal, badminton, Burley, Olympic gold, all those kind of things. And you think for her, or you might think the pressure gets smaller, but it doesn't. She actually talks about the pressure getting bigger. And I think that must be a pressure to keep pulling, those scores or those performances out the bag time and time again. I guess there's more expectation on your team.
Yeah, because every time you do well, you build the more and more expectations of that it's going to go well going forward, and then it's almost like everything that isn't excellence is not good enough, basically.
Yeah. And Roz said that was only her second 3-day, didn't she, of the year, because obviously she's had a baby and all that kind of stuff as well. So if you're going to talk about, mindset going into a championship, she's insane, really. And she said that, I think in one of her interviews, she said she struggled to get into it at the start of the week, but then, she couldn't help, being excited about riding as part of Team GB. So yeah, I think there must be a massive range of emotions go with that. It's not like you just shut yourself off from it and you're saying, okay, we're at the championships, I feel no pressure, I'm inside my bubble, and that's that. Like, I think it's crazy.
Yeah. And I think what we can conclude is just, you kind of think, or a lot of people seem to think, that this is something that you get past. If you were to be quote unquote good enough of a rider, you wouldn't have to deal with this shit. Like, or shit. I say it as something bad. It isn't necessarily. I mean, pressure is a privilege, as we often say. But I think it's an illusion that these kind of situations disappear. It never does. You just like grow into new of them. Like, you just grow into new pressureful situations, because if you constantly evolving, both mentally but also riding skill wise, you're constantly evolving, which means that you're kind of graduating into the next level. And as long as you keep on taking on that next level, whether that is a level that you're going into or the situation of pressure that you keep on challenging yourself further and further, it's always going to be there. And it's not a matter of taking it away. It's a matter of learning to deal with it.
And I think the horses as well. I think there was Aoife Clarke, who rides for Ireland, and Sam Lissington, and both of those girls said, obviously, the horses went in, they could appreciate the atmosphere. I think Sam's horse was only 10, and Aoife Clarke's horse, she said it was quite nervous, and both of them said for their horses to stay with them is a big deal. So it's not only our own nerves and dealing with the pressure and the atmosphere and everything as well, it's the horses. And both of those guys, the biggest celebration was their horses actually stayed with them even in that atmosphere, which is, it's amazing how to come out and think, yeah, he was with me. But like you say, that only comes from rounds and miles on the clock and uncomfortable experiences for the horses, for us, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think it's such a cool insight into what is actually going on in those huge environments.
Yeah. And that actually makes me think about, I saw an interview with Daniel Deusser, so obviously the show jumper, and he was kind of I think he was the anchor of the German team even in the show jumping. And he was talking about how he said, I felt the biggest amount of pressure the moment that, I think her name is Sophie, like she went in before him and she was clear. And he felt kind of like, he was like, that was the moment it kind of started getting to me, because I realized that if I put down a clear round, like we've done it, like it's happened. But he knew that really well before he had to go into the arena. And the funny thing he said was that actually what saved me was the fact that it was in the evening and it was getting dark and I'm sat on a stallion, and he got a little bit funny. Like he kind of could see the other horses, but they were kind of shadows and he didn't feel like he had them under control, and he got a little bit tricky. And he said that is actually what saved me mentally, because he got so tricky. I had to put my full focus on him and fixing him and managing him and making sure that he was performed and focused on what he was doing. And he said it took my full focus away from my thoughts, my intention, everything had to be on him to make that happen. And that actually made that the pressure thoughts kind of disappear to the background. And I think that was so cool to hear, because that is often what we talk about as well, how, you cannot not focus on the fact. Like, I think when you go into the arena, you cannot not focus on the fact that there's 40,000 people on the stands. I might be getting that wrong, but I know it's a lot of people in the Aachen stands. You can't you can't say go in there and, don't focus on the people on the side. That's impossible. But what you can though, and what happened to him actually automatically, was that his horse was being tricky and he had to redirect his attention to his horse.
Yeah.
He didn't stop focusing on the people. He started focusing on its horse. Mm-hmm. And I think that is, again, we talk about focus points and give yourself something else to focus, because that automatically is going to, steer your attention to something that is helpful. And I think it was so cool to hear. And he obviously went in and he did a brilliant job, despite all that. And I guess just to say that, guys, what we say, it actually works in reality. So, and I think, but I was going to say, I think it was cool how we also reframed it. Many people could be, when we talk about the horses, it's like, well, yeah, my horse is being extra tricky because I'm in Aachen. But he actually said, luckily my horse was so tricky because it helped me.
Yeah. And actually, Michael Young talks about that as well. There was, I think the right number is something like 35,000 people around the cross-country course. And, he talks about it was a good pressure. It's a good pressure, for a championship, because imagine all that. There's the noise or the movement, there's crowd, there's commentary, flags, screens, the scoreboard, where Britain are, where Germany are, what happens if you go clear, what happens if you don't, like all that information, and actually training your brain to come back to your process. Because like you say, on that cross-country course, think about the banking we stood on to watch the water jump. You can't not see that. You jump into the water. You jumped in twice, actually, both waters. You're jumping straight into those thousands and thousands of people. So I think it's that same thing. Don't think of a pink elephant. It's impossible not to. Don't focus on the crowd. Well, 35,000 people, it's kind of impossible not to focus on them being there, but training your mind to be present and come back to the process of your horse, exactly what you're saying. What does your horse need from you? What do you need from yourself? And, as a partnership, what do you need from yourself in that moment? Because it's impossible to ignore that amount of people, that amount of atmosphere, noise, flags, I suppose the whole environment, really. Yeah.
My God, I feel there's so much more to talk. I feel like we've just scratched the surface on this topic, because there were so many impressions. There's so much more things I want to talk about, but I'm conscious also we're coming up about almost 20 minutes. How about we kind of pause here and we continue in a next episode? What do you think about that? Yeah. Because I feel like there's so much more, and I feel like now I'm starting to rush because there's so much I want to say still around this. So shall we just take a pause, and then we will invite you all to continue with us in this conversation in next week's episode. Should we do that?
Good idea.
Okay. Good. Okay. But before I forget, as I mentioned in the beginning also, if you feel like this is capturing you just as much as capturing me and Lorna, this whole mental thing around riding, do know that you can actually work with us on a closer basis, and you can apply for that by going to myndic.eu/coaching. If you are as obsessed around the mental game as we are, then we would be so happy to have a conversation with you to see if there's something we can do to further support you, just help you gain more knowledge in this very fascinating topic of horse riding. Good-o. But for now, we're going to challenge you to start making strides in your mindset so you can truly make strides in your riding, and we will see you on the next Magical Monday.